Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about 3 players the Browns were linked to in NFL trade rumors. And then we're going to really break down the whole Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson injury saga, if you will. I've had a whole night to sleep on it and kind of think about it more and more. So I've got some different opinions and some, overall different points of view maybe that I want to share with you guys. But let's start things off with the trade side because the NFL trade deadline is rapidly approaching. And Bleacher Report came out with some players on the trade block, and they linked the Browns to a couple of these players, starting off with Titans running back Derrick Henry. So they listed 2 potential landing spots, the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens. I partially just want to trade for Derrick Henry. That way the Ravens can't trade for Derrick Henry because Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, that scares the bejesus out of me. I'm not going to lie. But let's talk about Derrick Henry as a potential trade target for Cleveland. I don't think it really goes without saying that Derrick Henry, of course, would be a major upgrade over Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt. Even if Derrick Henry is up there in the age column and he's only got 1 year left on his deal, it's King Henry here, right? If the Titans start losing games, and they're 2-2 right now, they just beat up on the Bengals. So if they keep winning games, they're not going to be interested in selling most likely. They look at the AFC South as wide open with Jacksonville playing so far. But if they start to lose games, right? If they go into the trade deadline with just 2 to 3 wins to their name, maybe Derrick Henry could be available. And if Derrick Henry is available, because remember, Tennessee got a new GM this past offseason, so he's not necessarily tied to these players all that much. He could be got, as in Derrick Henry, and I would be very interested if I were the Cleveland Browns. Now, when it comes to running backs in general, should the Browns trade for a running back? Type Y for yes or type N for no to keep it simple down below in the comment section. Moving on to the second player on the Bleacher Report trade block that was linked to Cleveland. This would be Denver's left tackle, Garett Bolles, someone we've talked about recently on the show. Now, the 2 landing spots that Bleacher Report identified for Bolles were the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets. I could definitely see the Jets being interested if they try to salvage this year, and they've had a horrible offensive line for Zach Wilson, and Dwayne Brown got injured. But Garett Bolles, he is under contract through 2024. His cap hit next year is $20 million. That's a big number. That's a big number for, I think, a good offensive tackle. I don't think he is a $20 million left tackle. Now, Jed Wills' cap hit for 2024, for reference, is $14.1 million. Now, Jed Wills is not as good as Garett Bolles. I don't think you're going to find anyone who argue otherwise. What you might find trouble is finding someone who's willing to take on an extra $6 million in cap hit and the draft assets to get Garett Bolles. That might be too much for Andrew Berry to agree to pull off. Now, before we talk more about Garett Bolles, today's Cleveland Browns report is sponsored by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. If you're trying to catch an upcoming Browns game, or you want to see a concert or another sporting event in your area, Game Time is the place to visit first. Now, what I love about Game Time specifically is the ability to get last-minute tickets for the lowest price. There's nothing better than like a spur-of-the-moment boys trip to a game, and with Game Time, you can do that without breaking the bank. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. Buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. They're also obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code BROWNSCHAT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code BROWNSCHAT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Getting back to Garett Bolles here for a second. Like I said, he is an upgrade over Jedrick Wills. His PFF grade so far, just 4 games in. It's not a huge sample size, but I think a big enough to have an idea of who Bolles is as a player at this current moment. He's a top 20 tackle in PFF's eyes. Overall grade 74.4. Much better at pass blocking compared to run blocking. And listen, that's sort of similar for Jed Wills, but it's just exponentially better. And if you want to protect Deshaun Watson and not have TJ Watt strip sack him or Alex Highsmith sack him and TJ Watt scoop and score, You might want a better left tackle. I think the Broncos could very well end up being sellers at the trade deadline. They just won their first game last week, and they had to come back from down 21 against the worst team in football in the Chicago Bears. Something tells me Denver's not about to rattle off a bunch of wins because they also play the Chiefs twice before the NFL trade deadline. And if they are sellers, Bolles would be an instant upgrade. Like, there is no question that if you got to pick a left tackle right now, I would pick Garett Bolles over Jed Wills, which last week I was on the fence about it, but I was a little bit queasy about moving on from your left tackle and switching it up midseason. I think everyone will be pretty happy if Deshaun Watson stayed healthy, and getting a better left tackle is likely going to help that. Moving on to our third NFL trade block candidate for the Brownies. What about edge rusher Danielle Hunter from the Minnesota Vikings? So here's who Bleacher Report identified as two potential landing spots. They went with the Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I could see the Raiders being interested in edge rusher because they have none. Chandler Jones has been, well, that's a whole separate video, but they want someone with Max Crosby. However, the Raiders suck. I don't think they're going to be buyers at the deadline. They'd be sellers, if anything. So what about Danielle Hunter to the Browns? Here's what Christopher Knox from Bleacher Report had to say. If the Browns want to continue building up their impressive defense, they would be a sensible landing spot. Cleveland added former Vikings Zadarius Smith and Dalvin Tomlinson this offseason and has the second most cap space in the league. My only question is, do we want to call ourselves the Cleveland Vikings or the Minnesota Browns? Whatever you guys want to roll with, that's fine with me. But this would be very impressive. And I don't know what, I think before Kwesi Adofo-Mensah left Cleveland for Minnesota, Andrew Berry took him to a magician in Las Vegas and had him get completely mind wrapped, and he just does whatever Andrew Berry wants, because getting Zadarius Smith for a bag of peanuts was borderline crazy, but getting Danielle Hunter on this defense would be absolutely insane. Danielle Hunter so far this year has 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 4 QB hits. I think that this would be a trade that they would have to wait until the last hour before the trade deadline, because I'm not sure Minnesota is dying to move on from the best part of their defense. And if they are, there's going to be a lot of interested suitors. So this could be one of those things that goes right up to the deadline, so the Vikings can either decide if they want to move on from Hunter, which I could see them doing that. He's on the last year of his contract. Or 2, who's going to give him the best offer? And I don't know what Danielle Hunter goes for. I would assume somewhere between a second and a third round pick. But the Browns might not be interested in the second because they have to go into next year's draft without a first and a second. And that's a tough pill to swallow if you're Andrew Berry. So of the 3 trades we looked at, who would you rather have? Derrick Henry, Garett Bolles, or Danielle Hunter? Let me know down in the comment section. You can type the initials for the player that, if you had to pick one right now, don't be afraid. Just type the initials down below for the guy you would want to see the Browns trade for. If you remove what it would cost to get them, let's say they all cost the same amount, right? Derrick Henry on the Browns would be so fun. I feel a little dirty because I feel like I'm kind of cheating on Nick Chubb because of this. But the reality is the season moves on. It's a next man up. It's a business, and we got to put that stuff to the side. But I think Bolles would be the most impactful, right? Might not be the sexy pick. You're getting a new left tackle compared to a running back or an edge rusher. But keeping Deshaun Watson healthy is proving to be extremely important for this team's success this year. And Bolles would do a better job of that than Jed Wills has so far. All right, next up on the show, speaking of Deshaun Watson, did Kevin Stefanski do Watson dirty? Did he do him wrong? We're going to talk about the entire saga regarding Deshaun Watson being medically cleared but not playing, and if whether or not Stefanski kind of threw him under the bus, and sort of break it all down. And I'm going to give you my 2 cents on it. But before we do that, I just want to give a quick shout out to some of our recent subscribers here at the channel, because here at the Browns Report, we're all about getting you guys on screen and whatnot. So Mr. Long in Cleveland, Colton Smith, Bob Carney, and Rally Jays, thank you guys so much for joining the channel. If you want to get a shout out on a future show, subscribe today. So let's look at this quote from Kevin Stefanski's Zoom press conference the day after the loss, where he was asked about whether or not Deshaun Watson was medically cleared. And he said, yes. And let me say this, Tony. I mean, he knows his body. He's played through serious pain before. very, very serious injuries. It wasn't a matter of pain tolerance or anything. He just did not feel like he had his full faculties. So let's talk about this for a moment here. Because on one hand, that has been twisted to Deshaun Watson was medically cleared and didn't play, but we saw Baker Mayfield go out there for week after week after week and wouldn't come off the field with a shoulder injury. We want that guy as our quarterback. Do you not remember? That guy it was a bad season. The Browns sucked when Baker was hurt. The Browns ultimately probably mishandled the entire operation, right? They should have shut him down. They should have rolled with Case Keenum. Instead, shout out to Baker. No doubt of him being very tough and wanting to play for this team, but it did not do many favors for the team in the long run. This team was worse with an injured Baker Mayfield compared to a healthy Case Keenum that year. So if you want Deshaun Watson to be like Baker, I guess you want the Browns to win 7 games again, because that's what happened. If you don't remember, 8 games, whatever it was, that was last year or 2 years ago. So if you want to go back in time and relive a losing season because of an injured quarterback playing through an injury, knock yourself out. I don't want to watch that again. And if we can have Deshaun Watson stay healthy by missing 1 game before the bye, I'm all for it. Now, as for Kevin Stefanski saying, yes, Deshaun Watson was medically cleared. Stefanski shouldn't be criticized for not lying, right? He could have gone out there and said, no, we decided as a team, as an organization, that he was not going to play. Instead, he more or less made Deshaun Watson the scapegoat for the loss because he said he was medically cleared. We all kind of thought he was going to play. We game planned for him to play. And so when he pulled the rug out from beneath us Sunday morning, I wasn't ready for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So that's why we had a bad offensive game plan. That's not on me, Kevin Stefanski. Watson threw us a curveball. Didn't see it coming. So don't get mad at me for the bad DTR play. That's because Watson decided to pull the rug out at the last moment and we weren't prepared for it. Listen, Stefanski, he shouldn't be criticized for lying. He could have just said something else. But he's never had an issue before with being tight-lipped, right? He usually keeps things very close to the chest, very close to the vest, very, very internal. He's never really all that vocal about injuries. So the fact that this one time he decided, I'm actually going to let a little bit air out as to what happened behind the scenes is a bit peculiar. It definitely allows the media to try and paint some narratives of there is a fraction between Stefanski and Watson, and Stefanski threw Watson under the bus saying, well, he was medically clear, but he didn't want to play, so we had to roll on to plan B, which we were not ready to do. So I think Stefanski ultimately could have handled it better. He didn't have to lie and say, yes, he was medically cleared. He didn't have to go out there and say, no, he wasn't. But he could have just kind of dodged the question, which he has no problem doing. He does that every time he speaks to the media. So why this one time he didn't dodge the question, I don't know. One more thing. Stop comparing Baker to Watson. We are 4 games in. I don't know who needs to hear this, but one too many people do need to hear this. Stop talking about what Baker's doing in Tampa Bay and just leaving it out there on Twitter with no extra context saying, I'm just going to put this out there right now. Baker's doing pretty well. Cool. Good for Baker. I'm not rooting for Baker to suck. Baker helped us win a playoff game. I would love to see Baker have success in Tampa Bay. But ultimately, if you had to go back in time right now, how about live in the present right now? Who would you rather have? Deshaun Watson or Baker Mayfield? If you could pick one quarterback to be on this roster right now, have it be Freaky Friday, they switch spots, who are you picking? Because I know who I'm picking. I'm picking Deshaun Watson, and I'm not thinking twice about it. Like, credit to Baker for resurrecting his career down in Tampa Bay, but the idea that Baker's numbers in Tampa Bay would be the same in Cleveland right now is just insane. One, Baker was awful last year. Do you guys not remember that? He got cut by the Panthers midway through the year. 2, Baker isn't a very emotional dude. Maybe that's what Baker needed to try and turn his career around. Whereas if he stayed in Cleveland and started to get a bit complacent, he might not be what he is right now. I don't think anyone's ever considered that Baker might be who he is right now because of the adversity he went through. And so the idea of Baker being the same quarterback in Tampa Bay as he would be in Cleveland right now, I think is just not asinine, but it's It's not that simple. So I'll roll with Deshaun Watson every single day of the week.